You know what absolutely infuriates me? When people sit behind their keyboards and have the audacity to claim that Alexa Bliss copied Harley Quinn without giving her any credit for revolutionizing women's wrestling. Yeah, I said it. And before you flood the comments section calling me crazy, let me tell you something that's going to blow your mind. Harley Quinn herself, the actual character that inspired a generation, acknowledged Alexa Bliss. The real Harley Quinn appreciated what Alexa did. But here's the kicker that nobody wants to talk about. While fans were busy tearing Alexa apart on social media, calling her a wannabe, a cosplayer, and every other degrading name under the sun, the woman who actually created the blueprint was celebrating her. Let that sink in for a second. The original was proud, but the so-called fans? They were out for blood. If that doesn't make you question everything you thought you knew about wrestling fandom and character evolution, then I don't know what will. Stick around because what I'm about to reveal is going to change how you see both of these iconic characters forever, and trust me, you're going to want to share this with every single person who ever doubted the brilliance of what Alexa Bliss accomplished in that ring. Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because we dive deep into the stories that everyone else is too afraid to touch. Today we're talking about something that's been eating at me for years now, and it's time someone finally said it out loud without sugarcoating anything. This is about respect, innovation, and how the wrestling world witnessed something truly special when Alexa Bliss transformed into her dark character, caught the attention of Harley Quinn's voice actress in the DC Comics universe, and somehow still got dragged through the mud by people who completely missed the point. Let's go back to when this all started because context matters, and nobody seems to remember how revolutionary this actually was. Alexa Bliss wasn't just some wrestler who decided to dye her hair and act crazy. This woman took everything she learned about psychology, character development, and storytelling, then created something that transcended professional wrestling. When she started incorporating those Harley Quinn-esque elements into her persona, especially during her time with the Fiend Bray Wyatt, she wasn't copying anything. She was paying homage while simultaneously creating something entirely new and uniquely hers. There's a massive difference between imitation and inspiration, and anyone with half a brain cell can see that Alexa did the latter. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is the part that all those keyboard warriors conveniently forget to mention. Tara Strong, the legendary voice actress who has brought Harley Quinn to life in multiple Batman animated series, video games, and projects, publicly acknowledged Alexa Bliss. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. She praised Alexa's work, complimented her dedication to the character elements she incorporated, and even suggested they should collaborate. Do you understand the significance of that? The woman who is Harley Quinn in the most widely recognized animated interpretations looked at Alexa Bliss and said, "Yes, I see what you're doing, and it's incredible." That's not just some random celebrity shout-out. That's validation from the source material itself. Let me paint you a picture of what Alexa actually accomplished because people love to diminish her achievements. She took a character archetype that existed in pop culture, something millions of people recognized and loved, and she adapted it into a wrestling persona that told stories in a way that had never been done before in WWE. She made children legitimately concerned for other wrestlers' safety. She made grown adults question whether what they were watching was appropriate for a PG program. She created moments that were equal parts terrifying and mesmerizing. The playground segments alone were some of the most creative and disturbing content WWE had produced in years, and yes, there were Harley Quinn influences sprinkled throughout, but it was distinctly Alexa Bliss in every possible way. The truth that nobody wants to acknowledge is that Alexa Bliss did for women's wrestling what very few have been able to accomplish. She proved that female wrestlers could carry dark, psychological storylines without relying on sexuality or stereotypes. She showed that women could be genuinely intimidating characters who drove ratings and merchandise sales. She demonstrated that you could take inspiration from mainstream pop culture and adapt it in ways that enhanced wrestling storytelling rather than cheapening it. And for all of this innovation and boundary-pushing work, what did she get? Respect from the industry professionals and the actual creators of the characters she drew inspiration from, while random people on Twitter called her a rip-off artist. Here's what really grinds my gears about this entire situation. When Roman Reigns started using elements reminiscent of mafia bosses and Godfather aesthetics, nobody accused him of stealing from cinema. When The Undertaker borrowed from every death and supernatural mythos known to mankind, he was celebrated as a genius. When Stone Cold Steve Austin channeled blue-collar everyman anger that had been done in movies and television for decades, he became the biggest star in wrestling history. But when Alexa Bliss takes inspiration from a chaotic anti-hero character and transforms it into something that fits perfectly within wrestling's theatrical storytelling tradition, suddenly everyone's a purist who's concerned about originality. The double standard is absolutely maddening. What people fail to understand is that all of professional wrestling is built on taking what works in other mediums and adapting it to the squared circle. Wrestling has always been a melting pot of influences from movies, comic books, mythology, history, and popular culture. The greatest wrestling characters of all time have been those that took something familiar and made it their own within the context of wrestling storytelling. That's exactly what Alexa did, and she did it so well that it caught the attention of the people who actually matter in the conversation about Harley Quinn as a character. The relationship between Alexa and the Harley Quinn appreciation didn't stop with just Tara Strong either. Multiple people associated with DC Comics and Harley Quinn's evolution as a character have commented positively about Alexa's work. They understood what fans apparently couldn't grasp, which is that having a character inspire wrestling personas is actually a compliment to the source material. It means that character has become so culturally significant that it transcends its original medium and influences artists in other spaces. That's the definition of iconic, and Harley Quinn as a character had already achieved that status long before Alexa came along. Let's talk about what Alexa actually brought to the table that was uniquely hers, because this is where the conversation gets really good. Yes, she had the pigtails, the playful yet psychotic demeanor, and the unpredictable nature that are hallmarks of Harley Quinn. But she also had the supernatural elements tied to the Fiend, the hypnotic control she seemed to have over audiences, the way she could shift from childlike innocence to terrifying menace in seconds, and most importantly, the wrestling ability to back it all up. Alexa Bliss could actually work a match at a high level while never breaking character. She could tell a story in the ring that complemented everything happening in her character work outside of it. That's not copying anything from anyone. That's being a complete performer. The playground segments deserve their own deep dive because those were absolutely brilliant pieces of wrestling television. Alexa would appear in this twisted children's show setting, with puppets and bright colors that became increasingly disturbing as each segment progressed. She would break down her opponents psychologically before ever touching them physically. She created an atmosphere of dread and anticipation that WWE hadn't successfully captured in years. Sure, there were elements that might remind you of Harley Quinn's aesthetic in certain comic runs or animated features, but the execution was pure wrestling storytelling at its finest. Nobody in DC Comics was doing weekly episodic content quite like that, which means Alexa was actually innovating within the inspiration she drew from. What's even more frustrating about the criticism Alexa received is that it completely ignores the collaborative nature of wrestling. She wasn't working in a vacuum. WWE's creative team, writers, producers, and Alexa herself were all contributing to crafting this character. They made conscious decisions about what elements to incorporate, what to avoid, and how to make everything fit within WWE's universe. The fact that they successfully created something that resonated with both wrestling fans and people from the comic book world should be celebrated, not condemned. It's cross-cultural pollination at its finest, and it brought new eyes to wrestling while giving wrestling fans a character they could truly invest in. And let's be brutally honest about something else. Half the people who criticized Alexa for supposedly ripping off Harley Quinn couldn't tell you anything about Harley Quinn beyond the Suicide Squad movie. They don't know the character's comic book origins, they haven't experienced the animated series that made her a star, and they certainly don't understand the evolution Harley has undergone over decades of storytelling. They saw pigtails and chaos and immediately jumped to conclusions without understanding that these are archetypal elements that appear across multiple characters in multiple mediums. The truth is that their criticism was never really about protecting Harley Quinn as a character. It was about finding something to complain about because that's what internet culture has become. When Tara Strong and others from the DC universe praised Alexa, they did so because they recognized a kindred spirit. They saw someone who understood the appeal of chaotic female characters who operate outside normal social constraints. They appreciated that Alexa was introducing potentially millions of WWE fans to a character archetype that might inspire them to explore comic books, animated series, and other mediums. That's the kind of cross-promotion and cultural exchange that benefits everyone involved. But instead of celebrating that connection, people wanted to create artificial drama and controversy where none existed. The reality is that Alexa Bliss elevated her craft to a level where mainstream entertainment noticed and appreciated what she was doing. That's incredibly difficult to accomplish in wrestling, a medium that often struggles to be taken seriously by people outside the industry. She built bridges between wrestling and comic book fandoms, she created moments that trend on social media and generated genuine buzz, and she did it all while maintaining the respect of the actual creators whose work inspired elements of her character. If that's not success, I don't know what is. What we witnessed with Alexa Bliss and the Harley Quinn appreciation is actually a beautiful example of how art inspires art across mediums. Harley Quinn started as a character in Batman the Animated Series, became a comic book mainstay, evolved into a movie star, and somewhere along that journey, inspired a professional wrestler to create something amazing. That wrestler then received acknowledgement from the people who helped make Harley Quinn what she is today, completing a circle of creative inspiration and mutual respect. That's how culture is supposed to work. That's how different art forms are supposed to interact and influence each other. So the next time someone tries to diminish what Alexa Bliss accomplished by reducing it to simple copying or imitation, remind them that Harley Quinn herself, through the voices and people who bring her to life, appreciated what Alexa did. Remind them that taking inspiration and transforming it into something new is not theft, it's creativity. Remind them that wrestling has always been about larger-than-life characters that draw from every possible influence to create something uniquely suited to telling stories in a wrestling ring. And most importantly, remind them that being a fan means supporting and celebrating excellence, not tearing down performers who are pushing boundaries and creating memorable moments. Alexa Bliss didn't need anyone's permission to be brilliant, and she certainly doesn't need validation from people who will never accomplish a fraction of what she has in their entire lives. But she got something even better. She got recognition from the creators and voices behind one of the most iconic characters in modern pop culture, and that recognition came because they saw something special in what she was doing. That's the real story here, and it's a story about respect, appreciation, and the beautiful ways that different forms of entertainment can acknowledge and celebrate each other. But let's go even deeper because there's another layer to this story that absolutely needs to be addressed, and it's about how female performers in wrestling are held to completely different standards than their male counterparts. When Alexa Bliss was getting destroyed online for her character work, male wrestlers were literally dressing up as comic book characters, movie villains, and pop culture icons without receiving even a fraction of the criticism. The Fiend himself was inspired by everything from horror movies to creepypasta internet legends, yet nobody was calling Bray Wyatt a copycat. Edge's Brood character in the late 90s was literally a vampire straight out of every gothic horror story ever told, and he's celebrated as an all-time great. But a woman takes inspiration and transforms it into something spectacular, and suddenly the pitchforks come out. This double standard extends beyond just the criticism too. Think about the merchandise sales, the crowd reactions, and the mainstream attention Alexa generated during this character run. Kids were dressing up as her version of the character for Halloween. Adults were buying her shirts and accessories in record numbers. Social media would explode every time she appeared on television. She was moving the needle in ways that very few performers, male or female, could claim to do during that era of WWE. Yet despite all that measurable success, despite the appreciation from the actual Harley Quinn creators, despite the critical acclaim from wrestling journalists and industry insiders, there were still people who refused to give her the credit she deserved simply because she was a woman doing something bold and different. Here's something else that needs to be said about Alexa's impact that often gets overlooked in these discussions. She opened doors for other female wrestlers to explore darker, more complex characters. Before her successful run with these supernatural and psychological elements, WWE was hesitant to let women venture too far into those territories. They were concerned about how audiences would react, whether it would work within their programming, and if female performers could carry the type of storyline. Alexa proved definitively that not only could women handle these character types, but they could excel at them in ways that created some of the most memorable moments in modern wrestling. That's legacy-defining work right there. The collaborative aspect between Alexa and Bray Wyatt also deserves significantly more recognition than it receives. These two performers trusted each other completely and created a dynamic that was genuinely unsettling and captivating television. The way they played off each other, the way their characters intertwined, and the way they elevated each other's work was masterclass-level performance art. Bray had already established himself as one of the most creative minds in wrestling, and the fact that he specifically chose to work with Alexa and develop this partnership speaks volumes about her abilities and his respect for what she could bring to the collaboration. They weren't just two wrestlers doing a storyline together. They were two artists creating something that neither could have achieved alone. Let's also address the business side of this because at the end of the day, wrestling is still a business, and Alexa's character work during this period was drawing money and attention. When you look at the metrics that actually matter to WWE as a company, viewership numbers, social media engagement, merchandise sales, and mainstream media coverage, Alexa was consistently delivering. Her segments were regularly among the most watched portions of whatever show she appeared on. Her character moments would go viral and bring eyes to the product from people who hadn't watched wrestling in years or had never watched it at all. That's the kind of value that transcends any debate about inspiration versus imitation. She was making the company money while making herself a star, and she was doing it by being bold enough to take risks with her character. The psychological depth Alexa brought to this character is something that separates great performers from merely good ones. She wasn't just doing spooky gestures and speaking in creepy tones. She was developing a complete psychological profile for her character, understanding the motivations behind every action, and portraying genuine mental manipulation and instability in a way that felt authentic within wrestling's theatrical framework. That requires serious acting ability, dedication to craft, and an understanding of human psychology that goes beyond what most wrestling training teaches. Alexa studied her character like a method actor preparing for a dramatic film role, and it showed in every single appearance she made. When we talk about the Harley Quinn appreciation specifically, it's worth noting that this wasn't just a one-time acknowledgement or a polite social media interaction. There were multiple instances of people from the DC Comics world, from voice actors to writers to artists, commenting on Alexa's work. Some shared fan art that combined both characters, others engaged with Alexa's posts about her character evolution, and there was genuine excitement within the comic book community about this crossover of fandoms. That doesn't happen by accident or because someone is just copying something. That happens because creative people recognize and appreciate other creative people who are doing something special with shared inspiration. It's a form of respect between artists that transcends medium and platform. The staying power of what Alexa created is another testament to its quality and impact. Even now, years after that character run has evolved and changed, people still talk about those moments. Wrestling fans still reference the playground segments, still discuss the psychology of her character, and still debate the various storyline directions that came from that era. New fans discovering old footage are blown away by what they're seeing. That's not the reaction people have to something that's derivative or unoriginal. That's the reaction people have to genuinely groundbreaking work that stands the test of time and continues to resonate long after it initially aired. What Alexa accomplished also needs to be viewed through the lens of representation and what it meant for young girls watching wrestling. Here was a female character who was powerful not because of physical dominance or sexual appeal, but because of psychological strength and creative presentation. She was dangerous because she was smart, unpredictable, and willing to operate outside the normal rules of engagement. That's a different kind of role model than what young girls typically see in wrestling or in mainstream entertainment generally. She showed that women could be the most compelling characters on the show through sheer creativity and performance ability, and that's an incredibly important message. The fact that professional jealousy and criticism couldn't derail what Alexa was building is also worth celebrating. Lesser performers would have backed off or toned down their work in response to the negativity. Alexa doubled down, leaned into the character even harder, and proved every critic wrong by continuing to deliver exceptional work. That takes confidence, resilience, and a genuine belief in your creative vision. She knew what she was creating was special, she had validation from people whose opinions actually mattered, and she wasn't going to let anonymous internet critics dictate how she approached her craft. That's the mindset of a true professional and an artist who believes in their work. If this opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, smash that like button, share this video with everyone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me what you think about the whole situation. Were you one of the people criticizing Alexa, or did you always appreciate what she was bringing to wrestling? Let's have a real conversation in the comments because this topic deserves more than surface level takes. Subscribe if you haven't already because we're going to keep diving deep into the stories that matter in wrestling, comic books, and everywhere these worlds collide. This has been real, this has been raw, and I'll see you in the next one.